Welcome to the University of Huddersfield, Paul Grimwood, and congratulations on your honorary doctorate. How does it feel?
Well, it feels absolutely fantastic, and quite surprised when the letter dropped through the letterbox. But yeah, no, it is. It's a great honour.
You graduated in business administration from the Huddersfield Business School here at the university in the 1980s. And during your time here, you completed an internship with Mars Corporation.
Indeed, yeah.
How do you feel your experience here helped you in your future career?
Well, I've just been talking to the Dean of the Business School about that because fundamentally I think it framed everything that I went on to do. Coming to Huddersfield University at the time, or Polytechnic at that time, it was something that I knew I wanted to work in business, and I needed something that was going to give me sort of a pragmatic introduction to the business world and a good foundation, a good grounding. But it wasn't actually until I actually went away and did what they called at that time a thick sandwich course, which we now call an internship, things move on and change, that I went and worked for the Mars Group for a full year. And all of a sudden, everything that everybody had been telling me for year one and year two, I started to understand. And because it was a year's placement, I got a lot of great experience. I got some big projects to work on. I had a proper job. And it really helped me understand year one and year two. And actually, it really framed year four when I came back. And working in the industry, so I worked for food and drink industry, worked for the Mars Group, it probably set me up for the next 35 years of my career, because I stayed in that industry for the full 35 years before, sort of finally coming to sort of semi-retirement a few years ago. So it really was foundational stuff for me, for which I'll always be very grateful.
During your career, you've worked all over the world, including here in the UK, Europe, the USA, for companies such as Mars, Nestle, Highland Distillers. What would you say are the key benefits of living and working in different countries?
I think it helps. First of all, every situation is very, very different. In some of the markets I've worked for, we've just been through 38 degrees heat here, and we think we've had a tough time. I spent a year working out in the Middle East with 50 plus being pretty much a norm. So working in that sort of environment, how your product develops, the type of products that you can sell, how your workforce operate, the multiculturalism of working all over the world has been incredible experience. But I think it benefits you as an individual, because you see more, you learn more, you experience more. But that also applies to a business context. When you've worked in so many places, so many different jobs, so many different countries, you tend to get towards the end of your career and there isn't a lot you haven't already seen. So it really does broaden your expertise and your understanding. And I'd certainly recommend anybody, first of all, to take a placement year somewhere and develop themselves, hopefully in the middle of their degree, because I think it's highly beneficial. But I'd also recommend they do an international assignment at some point in their career. Good for you personally, good for you from a business perspective.
As someone with extensive experience in the food and drinks industry, what do you consider to be the key challenges facing that industry today?
I think, quite honestly, if you'd have asked me that 10 years ago, I would have said product quality. Because I think a lot of food that was produced, certainly in Western Europe, in the UK, was of an acceptable quality. But you would be buying from low-cost producers. So quality was always an issue. And over the last 10 years, quality for good companies has become an absolute mantra. But probably 7 years ago, we started to really understand that it wasn't just about quality, it was about sustainability. And it was about, where does that quality come from? If you don't know where the product comes from and you can't trace that product, then in actual fact, how do you guarantee its quality? So sustainability and consistency. And then probably the last, again, I think sort of 7-8 years that's leapt into that is sort of the green credentials of how do you produce a product end to end with the lightest possible footprint on the world's environment. And I think there's an awful lot of greenwash out there with people saying we can, we will, we have. But actually the most important thing is we did, or we are doing. And I think the world probably, if I look, when I first joined Nestle 20 odd years ago, there was a gentleman retiring at the time, and he talked about the challenges that he'd had, and it was all about growth, and it was all about getting the quality, it was all about acquisitions. And really, only 10, 20 years later, here we are discussing a completely different set of key criteria, things that are not just nice to do, but they're business essentials, long-term sustainability of business. It's a critical, basic thing. And I think for me, what we're seeing a pace of change, and it's a big challenge for all of your students coming forward, because the pace of change has never been so fast, and it'll never be this slow again. It's going to continue. And so actually having people who have a strategic view, a longer term view, can react quicker than previous generations have done, I think will become a critical essential for effective business leaders.
You inspire our students here at Huddersfield, and it'd be interesting to know which figures have inspired you in your life.
Do you know, forgive me, but I've been asked that question before, and the last time I answered it, I came away thinking I didn't answer that very well. And I've thought about this, and my answer is there isn't actually one. There are many. I think as you build up to a sort of senior level and, you know, running substantial businesses and tens of thousands of people and billions of turnover and so on and so forth, there isn't one individual, but there's somebody, for example, who I admire greatly for their capability in terms of human resources, people development. You know, they were somebody who came to me and said, hang on a minute, it's all very good as taking on board these graduates at 21, but there are people coming out of school at 16 and 18 through no fault of their own, have got great intellectual capability but haven't had life chances that some of these are. How do we, and we built a program that allowed people to come into the business at 16, 18, 21, and no matter where you came into business, you could still qualify and have a degree at the age of 28. So that was somebody that I look back on and I think that was visionary stuff at the time, because it was a first, and I admire. So I'm constantly looking at people, not necessarily for who they are holistically, but for what is really their key strength. You know, I've been fortunate to go up to Silicon Valley and meet chief executives of Twitter and Facebook and so on and so forth. And you look at them and you think, well, I like this, but I'm really impressed with that. You know, for example, I would think in terms of the digital space, you know, people who actually have the strategic ability, you know, like a Steve Jobs of this world, to actually think, really to move the world 20, 30 years ahead of where we were, because I had a vision for what technology could do for mankind. So I'm constantly looking for individuals. So is there one person I admire? I'm probably going to say my wife for putting up with me for over 30 odd years, big tick there. But when it comes to a business context, it's always looking at for the best thing, because, you know, at the end of the day, people who run major corporations or have made it to the top of their game have made it because they have a certain key skill, and finding what that is and admiring it and trying to incorporate it, I think is probably what I try and do.
What is your fondest memory of your time here at Huddersfield?
Good grief, fondest memory. I have a lot actually. I think it was the camaraderie and the friendships that I made here initially. And I think that very quickly then became, because at the time I was here, the university was a lot smaller, but I still get the feeling walking around now, it's very social, because it's all on one campus, it all feels very close. But I think my fondest memory probably is the memory given the benefit of hindsight. And that is actually, Sarah said, the fondest memory is, I didn't realise at the time, but what the university gave me in terms of a practical, pragmatic grounding in business, coupled with a year out in terms of placement, it really was foundation building. And to be honest, I was, you know, as I was driving over here, I'm thinking, well, the university was actually here for me right at the very beginning of my career. And as I get awarded my honorary doctorate today, it's here for me right at the end of my career as well. So I've sort of come full circle. Yeah. So those are probably my fondest memories.
And finally, is there one piece of key advice you would give to our graduates?
I think one piece is very difficult to give because I could sit and wax lyrically. But I would actually say to everybody as you build your career, is you're building your career now in the university, and you're putting down the foundation stones. And it really is about broadening and getting as much experience as you possibly can. You know, have you got experience of man management? If not, well, if you want to go up here, it's a critical part of anybody's capabilities going forward. You've got to go and get it. If you haven't got it in your CV in the next 2 to 3 years, go find a way of getting it. You know, have you got digital exposure? Build up a portfolio of experiences, because the broader you make yourself earlier on, you can then decide to focus and become more of a specialist later on. If you become a specialist a little bit too soon, you can pigeonhole yourself into a role that can be rewarding, but can sometimes be quite constricting. So my advice is, the more experience you can get, more experiences, the broader, for example, we talked about, you know, go and take an industrial placement, an internship. Go and take 6 months abroad working with it. Go and get man management experience. Build and build and build up yourself in terms of this really rounded portfolio. And then you get to a point probably where all of a sudden you can decide to specialize on something toward the end, or there's a particular type of company you want to run. It could be your own company, it could be a PLC or whatever it is. But get the experiences earlier on in life, because those experiences will really set you up for the future.